the next poll?
Sky high ski jump.
Oh, and I think we have some people from outside the US. We didn't include that.
All right, one more second here and then we'll end this poll and share the results.
A lot of people from the Northeast and a good mix of people from other places. I'm from Arlington, Virginia, so mid-Atlantic. And do we have one more poll?
Yes, yep. And actually, Nancy, there's even one more after this.
Oh, okay, two more polls.
All right, one more second to complete this poll and then we'll share this one out.
So about 40% of you have some exposure or experience with outdoor learning, and 21% of you are very experienced and comfortable. And 8 of you are completely new to it. Well, welcome everybody. This is not a nationally representative sample. We are way more experienced than most groups.
Shall I launch this last poll, Nancy?
Mm-hmm.
All right, couple more people.
Very cool. All right. So we have 8 people that are already offering outdoor learning, 5 people that are ready to go, and 23 people who have either begun planning or are implementing and setting up spaces, and the rest of you are considering. Well, I hope this presentation helps. Okay. I think I will start sharing my screen now. Oops. Wait, can you see my screen? Did I share? No.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yep, now we can, Nancy.
Okay. Okay, so welcome to Creating Outdoor Spaces for Natural Play and Learning. Let's see. So this is our agenda for today. We've just finished the polls, and we are actually a little ahead of schedule. I'm going to talk about an initiative that I've been involved in since the spring called the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative. And I'm going to talk about, the piece that I'm working on with that initiative is outdoor infrastructure and kind of how to set up outdoor learning spaces quickly and simply. And so I'm going to share some of that information, and then I'm going to kind of segue into what I always do, which is creating natural play and learning spaces, in non-COVID times, that I hope will give you a lot of ideas ranging from the simple to the more, the larger scale transformations that you can make. And then we're going to do some small group breakouts where you can meet with people that are working with similar ages of children and talk about what you think you'll be able to take from this session and what else you need. And then we will reconvene and hear back from each group, and that's our plan for this afternoon. So the first thing that I want you to do is to rename yourself so that we know which breakout group you want to be in. So that means going to your picture and hovering over the upper right corner. There'll be 3 dots, and the drop-down menu will have an option to rename yourself. And I want you to rename yourself according to these groups. Group 1 would be people working with infants and toddlers. Group 2 would be 3 and 4-year-olds. Group 3, kindergarten. Group 4, 1st and 2nd. Group 5, 3rd through 5th. I think we only maybe have 1 middle school teacher, so you might want to pick a different group. And then we have administrators. And if you're not working with one of these age groups, but you would like to talk to other people who are, you should go ahead and choose accordingly. And Liza will post this list in the chat, so you'll be able to see that if you don't get it done right away.
Nancy, do you want folks to keep their name? Like, do their name?
Yeah. The example in red there is I just added the number right in front of my name. So definitely keep your name. Okay. So this is the National COVID-19 Outdoor Learning Initiative, which was founded by a collaborative of 4 different organizations based in California: Green Schoolyards America, the Lawrence Hall of Science, San Mateo County Office of Education, and 10 Strands, which is a nonprofit in the San Francisco area. And together, they came up with the idea that the answer, or at least part of the answer for reopening schools during COVID, is to use the outdoors. And they did a national webinar I think it was in May, and there were over 100 people from across the country who participated, and I've been leading one of the working groups since then, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing. So the vision is, the vision is to use outdoor spaces as strategic, cost-effective tools to increase capacity on school sites as schools reopen with physical distancing measures in place. So that might mean that indoors in a typical school, the indoor space maybe has the capacity for 50% of children to be indoors, and by using outdoor spaces, 50% of children in small cohort groups could be placed around the campus. And if there isn't enough space on the campus, on the school grounds, we could use local parks to provide outdoor spaces where children can gather, and even some urban schools that I know about are using parking lots and closing streets as spaces where children can be more safely back at school outdoors. So the purpose of this outdoor learning initiative is to support school districts around the country to maximize the number of students who can be accommodated on site with physical distancing measures in place. Our approach is to reframe outdoor learning as Plan A, so that whenever the weather is good enough or whatever other conditions prevail, you take learning outdoors. And only when the weather or some other circumstances don't allow it do you go indoors or online. That would be Plan B. And so what the initiative, the group working on this, is trying to do is to help schools create plans to move as many classes and school programs as possible into the school grounds and parks using low-cost temporary materials. We're helping schools plan for weather, and equity is a theme that underlies everything that we're doing. And partly that manifests itself by providing outdoor clothing along with infrastructure so that children have the gear that they need to be safely and comfortably outdoors. We are divided into 11 working groups. 10 of the working groups are working on creating materials that will eventually be an online book that will be available for free download. And I'm co-leading the outdoor infrastructure group number 2. And we are almost finished with, I think, about a dozen 2-page briefs that cover accommodations for weather, for accessibility, dealing with insects outdoors, the kinds of furnishings you might need for your outdoors, just a whole range of the issues that come up and the questions that people have when we suggest the idea of working outdoors. So there's 10 working groups. They're not all convened yet. Some of them are haven't started yet, but many of them are deep into producing resources. And then group 11 is a community of practice for early adopters. And I think that at last count, there were about 25 schools and school districts across the country who were ready to dive in without waiting for all the resources that the other 10 working groups are creating. And so that group of people, early adopters, meets every Tuesday. All these different groups have different times during the week that they're meeting and presenting what they're doing or hearing presentations from other groups. I think group 11 is fascinating because every week there is a presentation by a school or a school system that is either up and running or very close to being up and running, and they share their strategies and their plans and what they're doing. And then we break up into small groups where people can brainstorm and ask questions. And then the other thing this community of practice does is field test all the materials and review all the materials that the other groups are creating. Oh, and one more thing about the outdoor infrastructure group, we're creating resources for schools and educators who are moving learning outdoors. There's also a group of volunteer designers, landscape designers and landscape architects from across the country who are available to provide free design consultation to schools that are trying to figure out how to arrange their campus to make this work. So all of this is information is available on the website, greenschoolyards.org, and then there's a COVID-19 tab. Whoops. So these are some of the materials that we are working on producing. Oh, so I already basically talked about everything on this slide, sorry. And so several several documents offering guidance for school reopening and school reentry have been released in the past few weeks, or the past maybe month or so. The American Academy of Pediatrics Guidance for School Reentry strongly advocates having children physically present, and they say for every age group that schools should be utilizing outdoor spaces when possible. And certainly all of us on this call are aware that this whole experience of schools being closed and children being separated from their peers has been in various ways for various children in various situations traumatizing. And so thinking about children's mental health and really prioritizing that. And I'm going to talk more about the research about what green spaces can do for mental health coming up, but we know that it's really important. The other guidance document that recently came out was the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and they have included recommendations about using outdoor classrooms to both increase space and promote health. And there's a quick link there in the slide. Okay, now I'm going to segue into some of the research that I always talk about and advocate even in non-COVID times about why nature and time in nature is good for children. So this first study looks at 4 generations of the same family when each member of the family was 8 years old. So the first generation back in 1919 is that big triangular blob on the map. The great-grandfather, George, was age 8 in 1919, and he was allowed to walk 6 miles by himself to go fishing or just to spend his day. The grandfather was age 8 in 1950, and he was able to walk about a mile on his own out in playing in the woods. The mom lived in a community with a swimming pool, and she was allowed to ride her bike by herself a half a mile away. I can't see the date, but I think that was in the 70s. And then the son in 2007 was an 8-year-old, and he lived on a cul-de-sac and was only allowed to walk to the end of his street about 300 yards independently. And he didn't really like going outside because there was never anyone to play with, and his parents would drive him to a place where it was safe to ride his bicycle. I think this is probably familiar to all of us. This study took place in the UK, but certainly in the US. Children's access to nature has diminished over the years and across generations. But children's need for nature hasn't changed. And so what I'm advocating is that we bring nature to the places where children are allowed to spend their time. And I will say, as kind of an aside here, I was so impressed and even moved to see, especially at the very beginning of the stay-at-home orders in my neighborhood here in Arlington, Virginia, how many more children I saw playing outside, riding their bikes in groups, drawing chalk on their driveways, and just families hanging out in their yards. And that was something kind of magical that happened when people couldn't go anywhere else. And granted, I'm coming from a background of privilege, and it wasn't that way for everyone, but in some places it was cool to see that children were using the outdoors in good ways. This is an interdisciplinary study from Sweden that brought together physicians and educators and landscape architects, psychologists, that compared groups of children in what was called at the time of the study outdoors and all-weather schools, which we would call forest schools, and compared those to traditional Swedish preschools. And they found that across every measure, the children who were in the outdoor schools were doing better. They were sick less often, they had lower blood pressure, there was less conflict between children. Teachers were more often in the role of resources for children and less often policing and dealing with conflicts. Children could balance on one foot longer, they had better upper body strength. Just on every measure, they were doing better. This is a study from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville where they transformed their outdoor space from a traditional playground to one that incorporated natural elements like boulders and logs. And they found, surprisingly, that children were more physically active in the nature play space than they were in the traditional playground. And that was surprising, I think, because we often think that what manufactured equipment is good for is encouraging children to be physically active. But what the researchers found was that having loose parts and materials that changed and that children could change inspired and invited more movement. And no sanitizing is required in nature play spaces. These are guidelines that came out pretty recently from the CDC about sanitizing schools, returning to school, and the sanitizing that would be required. And interestingly, for outdoor areas, the CDC does not recommend sanitizing. High-touch surfaces, plastic or metal, such as grab bars or railings, should be cleaned routinely. It's not an efficient use of supplies to spray disinfectant on playgrounds. But most importantly for this perspective that we're taking in this workshop is that cleaning and disinfecting wooden surfaces or ground covers, play structures, benches, tables, and certainly logs and tree stumps, mulch and sand is not recommended. And any kind of ground surface is not recommended that it be disinfected, because really the virus is dispersed quickly in the sun and the rain and the fresh air. And so that's another reason why it's really healthy for kids to be outdoors. Here's another study, a series of studies from the University of Illinois, the Landscape and Human Health Lab, where they've been studying children with attention deficit disorder for 2 decades, and have discovered that kids with ADHD, when they spend time outdoors in green spaces and then come back inside, their symptoms are reduced. And there have been subsequent studies that say that learning outdoors does kind of the same thing in helping to allow the part of the brain that's required for focused attention to rest. And certainly, here's another image about that. Certainly, with all the time that many of us are spending looking at screens, we are experiencing this level of fatigue. Faber and Kuo from the University of Illinois call it directed attention fatigue, which means the part of your brain that's required for focused attention gets tired. And when you go outdoors and you're outside in nature, not like outside playing basketball, but you have to be in a green space with nature, that's something called attention restoration theory comes into play. And this time in nature allows that focused part of your brain to rest and to be restored. And you are then able to think creatively and to make good decisions and to focus and attend more. Faber and Kuo say that this giving your brain these breaks is as important to good mental health functioning as sleep. And this is one of my favorites from the American Society for Microbiology, they discovered that there is a bacteria in the soil called Mycobacterium vacci. And when it comes in contact with your skin, it produces serotonin in your brain. So if you feel calm and happy and maybe more able to focus and think when you're outdoors working in your garden, this is the reason why. I bet some of you saw this article that came out in the New York Times in July that looked back at the history. There is a historic precedent to the idea of taking learning outdoors during a pandemic. So in the 1920s, I guess in 1918, the Spanish flu and tuberculosis were both running rampant. And what happened in New York City and in Chicago and in Rhode Island and in places all across the country is that educators moved learning outdoors. The link is here in the bottom of this slide, but if you just Google New York Times outdoor learning, you'll find that article, and the pictures, the historic pictures, are fascinating. But this is a group of children on a ferry boat, having their class outdoors on a ferry boat. Sharon Danks, who is the CEO of Green Schoolyards America, the founder and the CEO of Green Schoolyards America, and also the kind of visionary behind the whole COVID outdoor learning initiative, says that there are approximately 100,000 public schools in the US. About 15% of them have some experience with outdoor learning and school gardens, but outdoor learning is completely new to the remaining 85%. And that's why I said that our group with 70% of you with some experience with outdoor learning is not representative. But our goal for this initiative is to meet each school where they are in moving learning outdoors. So for some schools, it will just be taking the things that they're doing indoors and moving them outdoors, moving their desks outdoors, taking their tablets or their books outdoors. And that's as much as they'll do, and that's wonderful. And then for other schools, they're going to really explore the possibilities in a broader way. And so in this presentation, I'm hoping to provide a range of options for how to move learning outdoors so that wherever you are and wherever your school is, you'll find something that fits. So if I didn't say the website already, it's greenschoolyards.org, and there is a page on outdoor learning during COVID with all these resources that I've been sharing, and then more. So if you're interested in following the work of this group or volunteering for one of the working groups or getting involved, you can do that. So this is one of the things that we've been doing, is these case studies where we take a typical school from one region of the country or one particular kind of weather situation, and do kind of a conceptual plan for how they could move learning outdoors. So this one is for a school in Northern Virginia, and you see their building and their parking lots and their playing fields and some wooded areas on their campus. It was a school with 39 classrooms indoors, and we were able to find spaces, socially distanced spaces on the campus, so that every one of those 39 classes could have their own outdoor meeting space, so that maybe half of the children could be indoors and half could be outdoors on any given day. So the green dots represent outdoor learning spaces that could be used with no or low investment, financial investment. So those were either existing outdoor learning spaces, or they were like a grassy lawn with a shade tree, like really simple places where a teacher could just take a group of children out, maybe using mats for them to sit on, and so that would work simply for those green dots. And then the yellow dots were ones that typically didn't have any kind of shade or shelter. So with a moderate investment in adding some kind of shade structure for those groups, we could have that many more groups outdoors. And then the red dots were typically places that either needed some kind of infrastructure investment. Either they were completely wooded and the woods needed to be cleared, or they were unfenced and close to a street and would need a fence. But by making those investments, we were able to have outdoor spaces for every classroom. So that's just an example of kind of the way to approach taking learning outdoors for a relatively large public school. The first thing that people ask about when we talk about this idea of moving learning outdoors is the weather, and how is it going to work when the weather is challenging. And I think one thing that we like to say that I mentioned earlier is the kind of plan A, plan B, that you only take children outdoors for learning when you feel like you can manage whatever the weather conditions are. And the way that you manage that starts with having the right clothing. So whatever the weather, part of the whole equity approach to this model is that every child has the gear that they need. And we have done a little bit of communicating with some of the outdoor gear companies, Land's End and Patagonia, and in your area it would probably be LL Bean, about making donations or offering things at a discount to schools that are trying to move learning outdoors, and kind of the mutual benefits to the company and to the community of children being able to go back to school safely by being outdoors. And so as I said, the simplest way to do this is to take the places where you already have some shade and move learning outdoors that way. And it could be as simple as a circle of stumps. It could be moving your picnic tables into the shade of a tree or under the shade of an existing awning. It could be having benches. And each of these images are from pre-COVID, so they're not specifically taking social distancing into account, but I think you could have 1 or 2 children at each picnic table. You could have 1 child on each bench, and for the stumps, you maybe would want to space them further apart or only use, some alternating set of those to be socially distanced. Here are some examples of some affordable ways to add shade to the outdoor space if there's not a tree available. So these are shade sails, either attached to posts or they can be attached to the building. And you see children, these are California children sitting on straw bales. And here is, I think, a really creative way to create some simple shade on asphalt. This is using something called camouflage netting. And it's nice because it lets the wind pass through so that they're not likely to blow down. And here, this is at a school in California, the Golestan education program. They were experimenting with different ways to anchor those kind of temporary shade structures on their asphalt by using tires and buckets of concrete. And I think they did have some trouble with things blowing over on windy days because of the area where they were in San Francisco. But so that's one of the challenges, but that's one of the things that our working groups are working on developing, is some good suggestions for how to make that work. But there you see, this is just a kind of bare asphalt schoolyard where they've added some shade and some blankets and some cardboard boxes and straw bales and tents. And in a pretty simple way, made a pretty uninviting space, relatively comfortable and inviting for children. Here are some more examples of kind of creative ways to provide shade with patterns and colors that add kind of something to the interest, to the visual interest of the space. And here are beyond shade, these are shelters that would protect a group of children and a teacher on a rainy day. It can be a temporary structure like an event tent. Some of the school districts that are working on this have partnered with event companies because there aren't very many big outdoor weddings and events happening right now. And so they're creating these partnerships where the schools can have access to these event tents and use those as shelter on rainy or snowy days. And sometimes you can have heaters inside those tents. Some of them can have roll down sides on 2 sides or on 4 sides as a windbreak. And then the other 3 pictures are permanent shelters, pavilion type shelters that allow a group of children and teacher, maybe even more than one group of children and a teacher, to be outdoors, socially distanced and in the fresh air. Here are some examples of work surfaces. And again, these are pre-COVID pictures, so you would have to take social distancing into consideration, but having work surfaces where children can have their snack or do their projects in the out of doors. And here are some examples of storage, organized storage for loose parts. In the upper left picture, those are all natural materials. So according to the CDC, you wouldn't need to think about sanitizing and disinfecting. Some of the other materials you might want to assign those to individual children to have their own storage bin with their own set of loose parts, depending on what the health experts in your community are recommending. And here are some more examples of storage in the out of doors that allows the materials and things that you need to be able to teach outdoors and for children to play in different ways outdoors, to have those materials right at your fingertips. So the next thing that I want to talk a little bit about is content and bringing academic content to the out of doors. I do believe that anything that you teach or anything that children learn inside can happen outside with good design. So here are some examples of some art spaces in the out of doors. A gazebo that has been transformed into a little art center, outdoor easels that either children can paint on paper or directly on acrylic plexiglass. And then that upper right picture has a sink that is just connected to hose water and drains into a gravel pit. Those are really simple ways to have art in the out of doors. Painting on vertical surfaces or horizontal surfaces, painting on rocks, painting with your bare feet. There's nothing that says children can't be barefoot during COVID. Here are some images from a literacy garden that was outside of a library at this particular school. You can see in the lower right picture, there's back in the distance a storyteller's circle, a walkway in the center bottom with words pressed into it, and then little areas where children can go and read, and a magnet board, but just incorporating lots of literacy elements into this outdoor space. This is a courtyard at a public school that had lots of opportunities for children to measure air, soil, and water temperature, shadow length. Each child adopted a plant at the beginning of the year and drew and journaled and observed about that plant and how it changed over the year. And it was just a lovely outdoor space that classes could go to and do any kind of lessons. Okay, so so that kind of gives you a sense of some of the ideas for outdoor teaching. I'm going to spend some time now really talking about nature play and some kind of bigger issues related to designing outdoor spaces for children. I believe, as a designer, I believe that spaces speak, and that as a designer or as an educator setting up an outdoor space for children, you can have a lot of control about the messages that the space communicates to children as they visit the space and use the space. So here you see entries that that communicate a message of welcome to children. The picture in the upper left is of a child height gate. So that really says to children, this is a space for you, because adults have to duck to go under. And then the lower right is at the Ithaca Children's Garden, and that has 2 child height entrances and an adult height entrance in the center. And then the doorway is just kind of a whimsical, unexpected thing to have outside. And then the lower left is an archway that frames the entry, but also frames a really inviting view into that space and draws children in and just invites them to come in and play. Surfacing what's underfoot in a space is really important because it provides a variety of different tactile experiences for children. So you can see in this image, there are grassy lawns that are good for running and they're soft. There's an arched bridge that would have kind of a hollow sound as you walk over it. There are mulched paths, there are stone steps. And then here are some more images of pathways. And again, pathways can communicate to children how you want them to move and where you want them to go in the space. The picture of the bridge boardwalk in the upper left is a long straightaway, and that says to children, this is a place that it's okay to run in. It really invites them to run. And again, that hollow clomping sound. Whereas the picture with the round stepping stones on the right tells children that this is maybe a place to move more carefully and to preserve the plants that are adjacent, because those stepping stones communicate that you want to move in a deliberate way. The lower left picture of the stone gravel pathway is kind of serpentine, and it invites children to follow. There's some element of mystery there that draws children around the curve, and kind of the crunchy sound of gravel underfoot. Here are some more pathways. This is the word walk that I showed you in that literacy garden. I always feel like if we're using concrete as a path material, it's an opportunity to do something fun and creative. So sometimes I press leaves and ferns into the wet concrete, and sometimes words and all different materials. Also, you see in the 2 pictures on the right, there are boulders with mint planted in between them. And the idea there is that if you step on the mint or brush up against it, it releases fragrance. So that's another sensory experience in that space. And here are some more examples of texture walks with stones and tree cookies and different materials set into the concrete, or some of these are stone dust. And they can be used barefoot or with shoes on. You can use them with riding toys, and they just provide a whole variety of different auditory and tactile experiences, make you balance, follow along different ways, encourage you to move in different ways. This is an infant toddler playground with a loop path with lots of textures and a little bump hill. Can you see my cursor when I point at things?
Yes, we can, Nancy.
Okay, yeah, so that's a little hill for toddlers, and the loop path. These are pull-up bars for cruising babies to pull up to stand. outdoor rooms is a concept that I find really useful when I'm thinking about how to break up a space in a way that is comprehensible to children. So the way that you create outdoor rooms is by thinking about what's overhead and what's underfoot and what degree of enclosure is around a different area that helps kind of define it. So similar to rooms indoors, inside of a house, the living room is different than the bedroom, is different than the kitchen. It has different things inside and it has a different purpose. And we can think the same way in creating outdoor spaces for children and create different areas in their schoolyard or their play space that have different purposes and different things inside. Here are some examples of outdoor rooms at a school that had some really beautiful mature trees in the space before we transformed it into a play space. So I used the canopy of the trees to define a whole series of outdoor rooms. So this upper left one is, you see in the background there are raised beds and it's a school garden, and then this is the garden classroom under the shade of a maple tree, and also this frame of like an arbor overhead. And these storage cabinets had materials for teaching as well as whiteboards and things for teachers to give lessons. And a space like this could certainly work with the stumps spaced a little bit more apart during COVID. And this is an outdoor theater, the Willow Oak Theater under the shade of a willow oak. And then this is a sand area under the shade of a linden tree. So edges and dividers are an important consideration, both for around the perimeter of the space to keep it safe, to either allow or prevent visual access in and out of the space. But also now that we're thinking about moving multiple groups of children out of doors for learning during COVID, we need to think about some boundaries and edges between the outdoor spaces that may have multiple groups of children and teachers doing outdoor learning in either a structured or an unstructured way. So I don't necessarily have the best images of this, but the idea that we could think about different kinds of boundaries to help delineate the outdoor spaces during COVID. And it may be something as simple as like an animal trough used as a planter with something fast growing, some grasses or bamboo or willow planted in it, or even just willow fencing set in it would be a way to quickly divide the space. So this is the palette that I think about when I'm thinking about creating nature play spaces, that these are the things that that go into creating a space for nature play. There's stone and wood and water and sand, the earth, sculpting the earth, wildlife, insects and animals, thinking about things that make natural cycles visible, and thinking about senses, all of the senses, and ways to stimulate them. And then certainly as a landscape designer, I think a tremendous amount about plants and how to use plants for play and for sensory experiences. So here are some examples. Ooh, I'm going to run out of time. I'm going to go fast. These are tree parts used in various ways for active play. Log furniture made out of big tree cookies. Balancing, sand. Oh, this is sand enclosed with natural materials. Here are some more examples of natural sand areas enclosed with boulders and logs, and sometimes with water added in for more play value. Here are some water features and mosaic streams. Oh, I don't know what number slide I'm on, but I think I have a ways to go. I'm going to try to go really fast so I don't take up too much of your breakout group time. Thinking about fragrance from plants, from edibles that you may be growing, or just from the soil. The sense of touch. The skin is the largest organ of your body, so thinking about stimulating the sense of touch with a variety of textures. Those are lamb's ears growing. Sound, whether it's the sound of the wind blowing through grasses or homemade recycled materials made into musical instruments or store-bought musical instruments. Edibles, ways to incorporate edibles into the outdoor space. So we're thinking about all the senses. These are viewing windows. The picture on the right is a compost bin with a plexiglass window so you can watch the decomposition. And the lower left picture is growing root vegetables with plexiglass windows so children can see under the ground. Here are insect hotels and wildlife habitats that can be part of your schoolyard. Okay, I'm going to go really quickly through active play stuff. I bet many of you have had the experience of returning to a space where you spent time as a child and having that place shrink. It got smaller. And I think that that teaches us a lot about scale, and that spaces don't need to be really big, especially for young children to feel challenged. Having opportunities to hang and balance and leap and jump. More balancing. The picture in the lower left is a balanced trail that goes around the perimeter of a play space. Here are some more natural climbing elements. This is from the newest space that I just finished a couple weeks ago with a stilt walk and some logs piled up for climbing. A whole bunch of uses of tree parts. Make friends with your local tree company or arborist and let them know you're looking for tree parts. They often have to pay to dispose of them. Here are hills with slides and stumps set into the embankment. Here's tunnels and uneven surfaces. Swings and vestibular stimulation. Bench swings and hammocks might not be the best thing during COVID, but definitely good for children's development. Okay, and then here are some examples of playhouses and places for imaginary play and pretending. And many of these images are in my book. So if you want to be able to go more deeply, that's definitely available. And then I wanted to just talk a little bit about loose parts and giving children the opportunity to build and create and change the space is an incredibly empowering experience. And especially now when all of us feel so disempowered, giving children the opportunity to build and create in their out-of-door space is really important. So stones and tree parts, bringing indoor toys outside, sand and mud, bringing kitchen utensils outside. And these, yay, did it, okay. We're not too bad. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, but hopefully you have all renamed yourself and we can go into our breakout groups. Oh, let me just say quickly, when you're in your breakout group, I want you to introduce yourself and your program, talk about what you can take from this session and what else you need. And it would be really helpful if you would pick someone, I might have one more slide about this. Pick someone who can report back when we all rejoin in, now it's gonna be 15 minutes, so. There.
Nancy, so I just need one more minute because I'm trying to make these groups a little bit smaller. One group of 24 people so that they can do what you've asked of them.
Okay.
While I'm doing that, there was a question about whether or not you'll share these slides. And I think the answer is no, but I'll let you answer for yourself.
I think we're still figuring that out. The session was recorded and we still need to do a little communicating among the organizers to figure out if this is all going to be available. Some of it is on my website, which is earlyspace.com, and then a lot of it is in my book, Nature Play at Home, and all the things from the COVID Outdoor Learning Initiative are on the website greenschoolyards.org. Does that help? Oh, there's all kinds of good things in the chat. I will take a look.
And while you're looking at that, Nancy, also there are a couple folks who, there's only like one person who's administrator and one person who's middle school, high school. So if you want to rename yourself and I can plug you in, or just hang where you are, and when we go to the breakout rooms, you'll still be with me and you can just tell me and I can move you. So Nancy, I'm ready when you're ready to open these breakout rooms.
Yeah, let's do that. And I think I can go around and check on people, but so if I can, I will, and otherwise I'll see you in 15 minutes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Hi, Daniel. Do you want to tell me where you'd like to go? Oh, and you have to.
I missed that because I was late coming in. So middle school is where I work. Does that make sense?
So you're the only person with us, I think, who is a middle school teacher. And so you could stay with us. You can stay with me here, or I could send you out to one of the other categories.
Oh, no, keep me.
Okay. Daniel, where would you like to go?
Okay. So I thought I was going to go to the high school group, but that's not going to happen.
Okay, so you and Kate, you might be the only ones.
Oh, okay.
So I'll put you, that's fine. I'll make a room for the, actually, you know what? I can't now.
Okay,
So
that's fine.
Here.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can stay here. Any group is fine. I'm enjoying this. Thank you.
And Celine, sorry if that's not how you pronounce your name. Where
No, that's correct. I can go anywhere. Our school is pre-K to 8. So if you want me to stay here and round out a somewhat middle school group, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, great. That would be great. And Gail, are you wanting to hang with us or where shall I send you?
Yeah, no, this is good.
This is good. Okay. And Jen, I see where you want to go. I'm going to send you.
Thank you. Is it possible for me to be in a younger group? I think that I'm not grade 3 to 5. I'm ages 2 to 5.
Okay, I just sent you, so you should get, yep, there. And Natalie. All right, so welcome middle school, high school folks.
Kate is still here.
Yeah, this is great. I can't make, now I'm realizing I can't make another, wait, let me see here. Okay. All right, it should be coming up on your screen and you should be able to join now. And you just have to accept or click the button that says join this group. And then you'll disappear from us.
We lost,
I sent them off. I had a middle school group, so
oh, okay.
I sent them, let's see.
Got the power. You're doing great.
Kate, is it not coming up on your screen? It should be.
No.
No?
No, it's not. I had declined you had invited me to do the middle school and high school group, and I said later, so maybe I screwed it up by doing that.
Okay, I'm gonna send you one more time.
Oh, you know what? I have, it says join breakout room. It says you've been assigned to breakout rooms, 3rd to 5th grade A, which I didn't click.
So let me just move you.
Okay.
Now, can you get there?
I can get to 3rd to 5th grades.
Maybe go to 3rd to 5th grade and then leave, and maybe then we'll be able to put you in a different group.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for doing this, Liza.
Yeah, no problem. Are you feeling like it's going okay?
All right, and I left.
Okay. Shoot, I don't know why it's not. Okay, now is it coming up on your screen?
No.
So it's on my screen that you're there. It's just saying that you haven't joined yet.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm gonna try something different altogether. There. Okay, will you accept that? Did it come up for you?
The only thing that I have is if I click in the bottom right, the join breakout group section, it says 3rd to 5th grades. So I can do that again. It's just not letting.
Because now, yeah.
Huh?
Yep. Will you try that one more time and then leave?
Is someone named Natalie still here?
I think sometimes people join and then they're doing a million other things.
Right, okay. Maybe it worked, or she gave up. Uh-oh. Where did Liza go?
Where did Liza go? Oh no.
There she is.
There she.
I think it went fine, except I was going over in time and I got a little stressed. But did it seem okay? Was it crazy rushed?
It was great.
It was really great, and you have so many beautiful slides.
It's hard to. I added all the COVID stuff, so I had to cut out other things, and that's a really hard thing to do.
But it was a nice blend of things that people, to inspire people too. It was a good blend of the COVID addressing the COVID stuff, and then where can you go from here?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping. Thank you. Good.
Okay, so Kate, I'm still trying to figure out Kate. She isn't quite. I'm gonna leave you all and join this breakout room to see if I can help her.
Okay.
So, Nancy, one thing that I was thinking we can do, since we've recorded it, is that, how the courses at Antioch use Sakai? Where you can post videos to Sakai. And this new registration system that we use goes through and allows us to assign a Sakai page to one of these classes. So it would be one way to continue registration. It feels a little odd to me to make it available to people for free after we've had people pay.
Yeah, I don't think we should do that.
I don't know if you want it just to be out there in the huge world. This would be a way either to continue to take registrations, possibly,
Nancy, can we broadcast the questions to all the groups? They're wondering what the third question was. All right.
What else do you need? Yeah, how do I do that? If I post to everyone, no, it's just everyone in the meeting.
Yep, we can just broadcast it to everyone. And Kate, I'm gonna try you one more time.
Okay, if it doesn't happen, don't worry.
Okay, see if that works. So Nancy, if you tell me what they are, I can broadcast using on this.
Okay, it's what, introduce yourself and your program. What can you use from this presentation and what else do you need?
Okay. Kate, did it come up?
Yeah, I came up to you've been assigned to the breakout room middle high school.
Oh no.
I mean, I did move from toddlers to preschool this year, but this is a big jump.
Okay, and you want,
Toddlers, preschool, any of that. The 0 to 5 group,
yeah.
if possible. If not, I can just talk to my colleagues.
Zoom still has some little bugs, I think.
You know what? We've come so far since March, though. Nope. None of us knew how to do any of this before.
Exactly.
Oh, look at us. It's happened. You guys, you got the power. Nice. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And Beth, should we move you to a different group?
Yeah, well, I was in the right group, but I don't know what happened. I
Okay.
don't know if it was on my side, but I was in with some great people someone from Northampton, someone from Norwich, preschool as well.
And is it 3 and 4 year olds?
3 and 4 year olds, yes.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
no problem. See
Thank
if
you.
that works. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
So Peg, I think I'm okay with the recording still being available for people, just as long as, I think there were about 10 or maybe a little more breakout groups. What we're gonna do is Liza will call on each of the groups. And so we will ask one person from the group to be the spokesperson, and you'll each have maybe 30 seconds and just give us the highlights of what you talked about. And then we'll use the remaining, there might be 5 or so minutes for questions. We can look through the chat for questions people may have already posted, or you can just unmute yourself and ask questions at the end. But first we'll go through and just hear the highlights from each of the small groups. So go ahead, Liza.
Yeah, and so before we do this, I would just remind people to mute yourselves again. We just catch each other's background noise. I know we were unmuted for this, for the breakout rooms. So the first group is the infant toddler group. If someone wants to speak for that group.
Sure. My name's Whitney. There were only 3 of us. We were a tiny group, and actually 2 of us worked together. So that was kind of funny. We went over a little bit just the elements that we really enjoyed, that we felt like we could pretty easily incorporate into our own spaces. And then moved a bit into talking about some of the challenges that we face. You know, it can be kind of overwhelming to think about the cost it would take to implement some of, I mean, so many of the things you posted were beautiful, but there are obviously cost considerations for all of us. Just limitations of space. For example, one of the things that I had said is that I run a home daycare, so my yard is also my home's yard. And it, you know, I sort of have to walk the line between feeling like I want to make these beautiful changes for my daycare while also recognizing it's my own personal house. And also just another challenge we talked about a little bit was, again, weather, as you said, is always the first consideration. I noticed that, you know, the slides you showed, I don't think I saw any that were particularly like New England wintry, which is one of the big things on my mind, is just how to accommodate, especially infants and toddlers, the age group I work with, during the really cold New England winters can be a bit of a challenge.
Right, right. I think it comes down to the gear and knowing that Scandinavian babies nap outside.
Right.
I think We can figure this
We
out.
can do it.
Okay, thank you, Whitney.
And the three and 4-year-old groups, we had 3 of them. So if one group wants to get us started.
Yeah, I was in group A, I think. And we went around and introduced ourselves, shared kind of what stage we were at with outdoor learning and setting up outdoor spaces, and then moved to questions specific to sourcing materials and what are the top questions, you know, with materials that we still need. And so toileting outside came up, you know, what are the different options there, and also what's allowed within state regulations. We also discussed weather and temperature. We had somebody who's in a climate with extreme heat, and so how to keep children cool. And then winter also came up, you know, sourcing heaters and roof cover and different options for that that still promote airflow. Because with COVID, that's kind of priority number one with being outside, is creating a space that doesn't replicate an indoor environment, you know, something with walls or sides. You want something where open airflow passes through. Some of us work with children with special needs, and so had questions about helping to support children in these outdoor spaces. What accommodations do we need to consider? And then more specifically, visuals. How do we laminate and present visual aids, things like visual schedule? What are some options for that? Somebody mentioned putting things on a clothesline or putting things on a jump ring. So those were the topics we got to.
The COVID Outdoor Learning Initiative at greenschoolyards.org has a working group on adaptive strategies and looking at a lot of the issues for working with various special needs. So you might want to check that out. The document hasn't gone live yet, but the working groups are working on it. So there will definitely be some tips and ideas there.
And let's see, the other 3 and 4-year-old group B or C. Or if we've covered, if maybe the first group covered that, we could move on to the kindergarten group.
There was one other issue that wasn't covered that we talked about, although, I mean, you had just, the previous group had just mentioned it, but we did talk about equity quite a bit and thinking about how, you know, that gear, like really, if we're really thinking about that, you know, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing, but that the equity around good gear and clothing that will last is a challenge for a lot.
Right.
So how do sites afford that? Do they?
Sorry, you broke up a little bit for me. But I think philanthropy and either appealing to foundations or corporations that could offer funding or going directly to the suppliers is a way that I know some schools are approaching it.
And the kindergarten group?
Yeah, we had a good little group, and I apologize because we didn't make it all the way through our introduction. So I'm sorry for the people that didn't have a chance to share, but we had some good talkers in between and had some good insight. Mostly, we enjoyed seeing the pictures. That was really helpful in terms of space. A few of the questions that we're still working with or would like to have some answers on is how to meet. A lot of us are doing hybrid models of a combination of in-class with students on some days and then remote learning on other days. And how do you meet the needs of those kids in that situation as teachers and not being completely drained? Bathroom came up, that was a big issue, a big question. Cooking from the garden, ideas to incorporate cooking, which is usually in most of our classrooms with kindergartners, cooking is a big thing. So how do we do that outdoors? And then the concept of, we appreciated hearing the protocols for CDC on the playground. It's a little bit less stringent than I thought it was going to be. So how do we not share materials, or can we share materials out in the playground, like shovels or building blocks? And then the last one, a concern, but I know that next week there's another webinar on this, incorporating curriculum in the outdoor classroom.
Good. On the bathrooms, I think the Forest School people have a lot of good ideas that could help us. I know some schools are just using the indoor bathrooms on a schedule and in small groups, but then there are other schools that are bringing in porta potties and camping toilets and things like that as a way to add capacity. So, thanks.
In the first and second grade group. Was there anyone?
I can do that. Well, we talked about, I'm trying to review. So the idea of hanging things up also came up in our group, and how we can do that. And one idea was to hang hooks on use the building side of the wall if it's a place that's shady enough for students to put hooks on for chart paper, or actually mount whiteboards. We talked about using whiteboards, small sized ones, as hard surfaces to write on while you're outdoors, or with a white marker, but you can also put a rubber band around it to hold papers down. We talked about how kids could keep their materials. So we talked about having a tote. So each student could have a tote with materials and things that wouldn't blow away, and they could carry it out when they came outside. So we talked a lot about logistics like that, and how you bring those lessons outside with each student's contained supply tote. Anything else I'm missing, group?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And the 3rd to 5th grade folks? Was there anyone in that 3rd, 4th, 5th grade who wanted to unmute themselves and share what you came up with?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it we were talking about hoping to find some more curriculum for the older students. We all kind of shared some of the experiences where we're at in our classrooms, and some of the things that we're hoping to incorporate from what we saw in here. Some of us teach in, K-8 or K-12 buildings, so trying to make our classroom spaces so that all the different grades can use them is going to be a challenge, but we're finding some good things and getting some good ideas.
Thank you. That's everyone, Nancy.
Okay. There are some amazing ideas in the chat here. I just love these group think things where we all get to share. And if you don't already know this, if you go all the way to the bottom of your screen, if you click on the chat button, so you're seeing the chat, and then the 3 dots below that, there's an option to save the chat, and that will let you have access to all these ideas and links after the session is over. So we have 2 more minutes. If anybody would like to speak up with a question for me or for the rest of the group, we would be happy to hear that.
Well, this is Gail Friend, and we had the junior high school group, and I just wanted to share in that we got a lot of great ideas today. It was timely for me since we went back to school today in Ohio, but the other folks were from New Hampshire. But Serene had mentioned we were trying to figure out how we were going to get their clipboards and things like that out to the outside area that we actually create. And she had mentioned that they're using milk crates, which I thought was an excellent idea. It's light to carry. They can take their supplies with them to the outdoor area that we've created. And from today's presentation, I love seeing the shade sails. I mean, we had tarps, but I really like the sails because they create a new dimension. And then the other thing that made me think, I have actually done the sensory pass inside the classroom because all of our children are emotionally, physically disabled. And so now we're going to be able to, I saw the different balancing areas and the creative areas in your presentation today. And I wanted to thank you for that because I am going to incorporate that right next to our outside classroom now. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I love that. In terms of seating and storage, somebody posted the idea of buckets with lids on them that kids could use to carry their things outside and also to sit on. And then the other thing that I've heard is some schools are getting camping chairs, like the soccer chairs that have a strap that you can carry over your shoulder. So that is I think really easy way to do. Everybody has their own seat and they just take it with them. So thank you. Anyone else? All right, well, it's 4:30. Thank you all for joining, and I hope you'll come to the next 2 Thursdays because there are going to be some incredible presentations coming up and going in some other important directions.
Nancy, thank you so much for this really wonderful webinar. It was great and really fun to be with you all. If you didn't see it already, I shared the link for the, if you haven't registered already and you might be interested in the other webinars that we're offering, you can register here. And then also, if you're not already aware of the Inside Outside website, there are several resources there, and including, we've started to sort of flesh out some resources really specific to teachers who might be going out for the first time as a result of COVID. So you can access those there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.